A rose is a rose is a rose. Maybe, but you can't say the same thing about the symbols. Hello and welcome to the second episode of Marks and Glyphs. Today, me, Tanuj, and Kritika will be taking you deeper into knowing how logos work in creating a coherent brand image.
Okay, let me start you off. I have one question for you. What do you think about the Domino's logo?
The Domino's logo. So clearly, those two boxes are there for the name itself, the Domino's. Maybe even for the pizza boxes.
Yeah, that went very meta.
So, and the two dots on the boxes, maybe they are there for the pepperoni that they put in their pizza, no?
Yeah. You're very close. I mean, I have to give you that. But actually, there are three dots, and the three dots represent the three stores which they had when they created this brand. On top of that, Domino's actually is an ode to Dominix, which was like the name of the first store, which was very popular when the stores were created. And of course, there is the overwhelming representation of the red and the blue, the very American way of doing it.
Right. So, going by that nationalistic argument, every brand in India should use saffron, white, or green in their logo, right?
Yeah, you would think that, but it's not actually true. I mean, in India also mostly brands use red and blue. And it takes us back to the PAD emotional state map.
Okay.
PAD stands for pleasure, arousal, and dominance. So pleasure is an extent to which we feel good or bad about it. An example of the spectrum would be joy and anger, where joy is a more pleasurable stimulus and anger is a more not unpleasurable. Arousal is an extent to which a stimulus initiates activity in the or how energized one feels after it. So excited versus boredom, where excited is a lot more towards the high end of the arousal and boredom is towards the lower end. And dominance is the extent to which a stimulus creates influence over the receiver. So anger, for example, has a higher dominance, versus fear is something which makes you a little more submissive. You don't want to express it. And that's pretty much what pleasure, arousal and dominance altogether covers all the emotions that a human can have. When we think about logos, logos have the potential to probably create stimulus in the pleasure and arousal end of things. Not as much dominance, because logos by itself cannot change the control. A brand cannot change control with a customer only through logos. They will have to do actual brand interaction or some other manifestation, some other touch, not necessarily just logos. Thinking about elements of the logos actually have colors. Colors also have subsegments of hues. There is brightness also, which can be used as a key. On top of that, there's typography. And typography is not something which is restricted to logos. It extends to brand communication as well. Think about how the slogans are written. Just generally when brand messaging comes, when each of the prints come, what kind of fonts get used, the major macro message, how it is written, all of that is something which for consistency potentially will have a similar set of typography. But beyond logos, typography also extends to other brand communication. Going back to our discussion about colors, right? About the reds and the blues. Red is associated with higher levels of arousal, and blue is associated with a more pleasant spectrum of emotions, more on the calm, peaceful side of things, And if we look at some of the popular social media apps that we can think of, think LinkedIn, think the older iteration of Twitter before it became X, right? They all had, they were blue. And the reason they were blue was that it was something that you sort of went back after. You were not engaging in active thought. You were just going there to see what the others are doing, probably connect with other people in the professional networks. It was not about, actively looking for jobs. It was not associated with active activity per se.
Oh, that is why probably YouTube's logo is red, because it is indicative of a lot of activity that happens at the content creator side as well as the viewer side.
And beyond content creator, right, when you're consuming on YouTube, right, so you potentially are looking at ideas, you're seeing somebody else do full interaction, right? The purpose of you going to YouTube could be entertainment, could be learning something, so it makes far more sense to have it in red because of course it is far more associated with activity than LinkedIn any day could be, right? And then moving on to, let's say, another segment of products, FMCG, right? You have Unilever and P&G, which are the
Yeah,
two
both
major.
are in blue.
Yes,
Yeah.
they're both in blue because at the end of the day, they are reliable. They are comfortable alternatives of products for
Right.
people across the country in their huge, like a large portfolio of products which they have to offer.
Right. Talking about PNG, and you were mentioning typography earlier as well. So that logo is just made of two letters, PNG, right? So what actually might have gone behind making such a choice, having a logo just using using a one typeface?
Right. So PNG would be a classic example of what is called as a harmonious font. So I came across this paper which introduced the whole PAD model, and they also talk about types of typography. One is the harmonious fonts and one will be the organic fonts.
Okay.
All the fonts are only a subset of typography, but one way of classification. And what they said was that the harmonious fonts, which are like more symmetrical. So think of when you're typing on your Word, the serif and the sans serif, which is the Times New Roman, the Calibri. They are the kind of fonts which are there. So they're very symmetric. They don't look like handwriting. They don't look like script.
Right.
The ones that look like handwriting, the ones that look like calligraphy are called organic fonts. So more stylized, potentially dramatic. They are a different thing. They signal creativity.
Okay.
And again, going back to the whole pleasure and arousal spectrum, right? So the organic fonts are obviously more associated with arousal, and the harmonious fonts, the symmetric fonts, are associated with pleasure end of things. So if I had to take an example, think of Google and Godrej.
Right.
Take 2 minutes to imagine what the Google logo looks like and what the Godrej logo looks like.
So Google is pretty much very harmonious but yet very colorful. Godrej, on the other hand, is somewhat of a flowy font, calligraphic in some sense, yet very colorful.
Yeah, so let's say that they are kind of closer in terms they both have multiple colors.
Yeah.
They have the spectrum of colors, so they're covered on the color side of things, right? But Google, on one hand, is far more harmonious, and Godrej, of course, is more organic. And if you think about the transition of Godrej, right, so it actually did make a color transition from a completely red logo to 1 in 3 colors, which looks a little more like upholstery. And they did this transition when they introduced Interior, which was their interior design set of products, into their product portfolio. I'll give you an example where the typography and the color are in complete coherence. It's Coke. Coca-Cola, the color largely is red, or if it's a combination of red and black, it's a red background with black written on it. And then the font, of course, is completely organic because it's written in a script format.
Right.
So it just makes complete sense put together that it's supposed to create arousal.
So
it's
they sort
supposed
of
to
converge into delivering one kind of emotion.
Yeah.
So this reminds me of what Gautam was telling me the other day. There is this brand of vodka called Absolute, and its logo is blue in color. Probably blue this is for relaxation or something like that, right? Yeah.
You hurt me with that, talking about that in Ahmedabad. But yes, you are right. Absolute does have the harmonious font, and it's also in blue. Talks about all the good vibes that comes with Absolute, I guess.
So, alright, this was it for this episode of Marks and Glyphs. For the third episode, we'll look into the jingles and how they contribute to creating a brand identity.